Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Tragedy on the Oldman River in Lethbridge. A 17-year-old dies in a drowning incident. Plus, auto workers in Ontario voiced their concerns about a stagnant electric vehicle market impacting their livelihoods. And Israel protecting its citizens from Iranian missiles in underground hospitals.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge police, along with fire and emergency services, have recovered the body of a 17-year-old boy who drowned after attempting to swim across the Oldman River on Wednesday night. An extensive search was suspended last night due to darkness and resumed this morning. BCN's Landon Hickok has more on that story.
Police say they have recovered the body of a 17-year-old boy in a suspected drowning in the Oldman River near the high-level bridge on Wednesday night. At around 7 p.m., police got the call that the boy attempted to swim across the river, went under the waters, and never resurfaced. Police immediately deployed a UAV to search the site aerially, while Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services used a boat equipped with sonar to search the waters. Search efforts did continue through the evening until they were called off because it was deemed too dark and unsafe to continue. They resumed earlier this morning, where they eventually found the body at around 9 a.m. near the site of the suspected drowning. Police say there's not enough evidence to believe that this was criminal in nature, nor any to suggest any foul play. Their investigation will continue as the boy is scheduled for an autopsy in Calgary.
The Lethbridge Police Service send their condolences to the family and the friends of the victim. Parks Canada confirming that it's responding to a report of a serious rockfall incident near Bow Glacier Falls in Banff National Park. The falls is located approximately 37 kilometers north of Lake Louise on the Icefields Parkway. At this time, there's no official word on any potential injuries or fatalities. Parks Canada says its visitor safety teams from Banff and Jasper National Park are responding. Alberta RCMP has confirmed it is assisting the Lake Louise Fire Department with the incident. Temporary closures are expected on Highway 93 and the Icefields Parkway near Bow Lake. Parks Canada is asking that visitors avoid the area while teams respond. Overseas, at least 240 people in Israel have been injured after Iran fired missiles that damaged a hospital and struck several residential buildings near Tel Aviv. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba after its surgical ward was hit by an Iranian missile. The barrage was the latest from Iran after Israel began attacking Iranian nuclear and military sites last week, citing the immediate existential threat that they pose. An Israeli military official who spoke on the condition of anonymity says Iran used a missile with multiple warheads. Although an independent analysis cannot be made at this time, such missiles can pose a more difficult challenge for air defense systems like Israel's Iron Dome because they have to track more than one warhead. Meanwhile, Israel's military targeted Iran's Iraq facility and its reactor in order to prevent it from being used to produce plutonium. Israel's attacks have reportedly killed more than 600 people in Iran over the past week. The bombing of the Soroka hospital left 40 injured, but no one was killed. We find out in this report why that is.
That's largely due to these, Israel's underground hospital facilities. Many hospitals across Israel either convert existing underground spaces or build new ones. This one in Haifa was created in 2006 after Israel's war with the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. This facility in Ramat Gan spans 4 floors. The capabilities of each facility vary, with some being able to house more than 1,000 hospital beds, withstand 60 days of attacks, and relocate patients underground in a matter of hours.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced a prisoner exchange with Russia. The exchange follows 4 similar swaps carried out last week in accordance with Ukraine-Russian agreements that were reached at peace talks in Istanbul on June 2nd. Ukraine's coordination headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war says many of the prisoners were suffering from injuries and prolonged detention. Zelensky says most of the prisoners had been held captive since 2022. Russia's defense ministry released a video of Russian servicemen at an exchange area in Belarus. The Manitoba government has signed an agreement with a war-torn region in Ukraine to support reconstruction efforts. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew signed the agreement with the Kherson region Wednesday in Calgary following the G7 summit.
This is a partnership between Kherson and Manitoba that is a way that we can put action to the support that the people in our province feel for Ukraine. We can say that we welcome 30,000 Ukrainians fleeing the war, but now we can share our expertise with electricity, with agriculture, with education, and of course we welcome to learn from the experience and expertise that people in Ukraine have to offer. But the reason why is, for decades, the West has told Ukraine that if you stand up for democracy, we will stand with you. And so now in Ukraine's time of need, it's important that we show action to those words. And so Manitoba is signing this memorandum of understanding so that we can be sure that we are contributing what we can. We're not a rich province, but we're going to give what we can to ensure that Ukraine is victorious.
The memorandum was signed at the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Calgary. While Canada and U.S. continue to try to hammer out a new trade deal, Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced some new reciprocal tariffs against U.S. steel and aluminum. He says the tariffs will be imposed if a trade deal is not finalized by July 21st, the end of the 30-day negotiation period, a timeline that was announced after Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump met at the G7. Canadian auto workers in Ontario are sounding the alarm about Canada's shaky electric vehicle market. The General Motors Cami assembly plant that produces electric vans in Ingersoll, Ontario, has paused production for a few months due to slowing demand. In a move the union says has cost hundreds of jobs.
The ripple effects for the whole community are going to be very bad. We are going to lose probably about 60% of our workforce, hundreds of jobs, hundreds of families. We do have programs in place to try and help them out for the next 2 years. They still get 70% of their wages. That will hopefully help them pay off their mortgages, but they're not going to gain any. They're just going to be almost treading water. As far as our plant, our members, and the community, it's going to be devastating.
Yeah, with my wife and I both working at Cami, it kind of raises the worry and anxiety, obviously, of trying to pay bills, making sure our children are taken care of. Obviously, we want to shield the anxiety of what's going on to them. And when we do return to work in October, we were on separate shifts before so that we were able to accommodate our children. We'd always have someone home for the children, always someone there to attend to them if they needed us, sick days, anything like that. Now going to one shift, we're going to be forced to have a babysitter come in the morning, get them ready for school and get them off to school. And of course, any sick days or anything like that for the children, we'll have to deal with those as they come. Hopefully they're not going to be for too long and we can get back to a 2-shift operation and get on separate shifts again. But for the meantime, I think it will have a big effect on our spending and kind of how we take care of our family.
Well, it was exciting at the beginning because to be at the at the infancy of it and it being at the forefront of the start of a new industry, wow, this is a good opportunity for all of us. We can kind of perfect the processes, or we can be the pioneers of this. And unfortunately, the sales have not been there and haven't kind of generated the activity that we had hoped they would. And as a result, the work isn't there.
With the ever-changing effects of the trade war and the rhetoric coming from the United States, it's always certainly concerning on a daily basis. In the long term, I think that sanity will prevail, and the great things that we build here will be needed all over the world, including the U.S., and in the long term, it'll be okay. But in the short term, there's certainly some great concern.
I think the government should step into the places that are the companies that are selling vehicles in Canada but produce no jobs in Canada. So the Kias, Hyundais, if they're the Volkswagens, if they're allowed to sell in Canada, they should provide jobs for Canadians as well.
Alert Lethbridge, in partnership with Lethbridge and Tabor Police Services, have uncovered an extensive drug trafficking operation that involved the arrest of 9 suspects and the seizure of large amounts of cocaine, weapons, and $2.5 million of assets. Codenamed Project Lead Line, the investigation took 2 years to bust the criminal organization involved in money laundering. The criminal organization was connected to surrounding communities, including Lethbridge, Tabor, and Colehurst.
Alert alleges that this group was using real estate to launder proceeds of crime. The drugs seized includes a large amount of cocaine, fentanyl, methamphetamine, GHB, and illicit prescription pills. 9 people have been arrested. Together, they face 63 charges related to participation in a criminal organization, drug trafficking, criminal conspiracy, and money laundering.
This project has had a significant impact, disrupting organized crime and illicit drug activity in our region. This investigation sends a clear message. When law enforcement agencies work together, we are stronger, more effective, and better positioned to keep our communities safe.
3 homes in Tabor were searched on April 29th, which saw the arrest of multiple suspects. Warrants have been issued for 5 of the suspects. The city of Lethbridge is warning transit riders about a payment scam circulating on Facebook. The post invites people to get an unlimited travel smart card, which of course does not exist. The Facebook post asks people to click a link and enter their credit card information.
Unfortunately, this is the second time this has occurred. The first one was in April that we were caught by questions from the public about the scam, and it is a Facebook scam that was verified, and we've tried shutting it down in April successfully, and then it reoccurred a couple of days ago, and we were totally on it within a couple of hours, and we did everything to try to shut it down. Basically, if a deal is too good to be true, it might not be true. Please verify. If you see scams like that, verify with City of Lethbridge website or go in person. We've never sold 6-month passes or given away 6-month free card. Please be diligent with your information and double check it with websites and verify the information. Best thing is to try to do it in person, and then once you trust that source, then you can do it online.
Any information regarding Lethbridge transit fare cards can be found at lethbridge.ca/transit. YWCA Lethbridge opened a new housing program called HOPE. It's a long-term transitional housing where women and families coming from emergency shelters can live independently while taking the necessary and often lengthy steps towards a life free from violence. Jill Young, CEO for YWCA, says her housing program is the first of its kind in Lethbridge.
It really is that longer transitional housing, around 6 to 18 months, that allows individuals to take some time and build some of those skills and recover as needed moving through that phase and journey of life. So we have 13 different rooms, and the total number of individuals that we can serve at any given time will vary depending on what that family dynamic and makeup is. Now in our emergency shelter, we see many returning individuals for various different reasons, but one of the most notable and significant barriers is the housing crisis.
So the total amount of capital funding provided by the city to the YWCA was just over $230,000, and then that was also combined with 2 years of operational funding for a total of $401,000. So the total contribution from both the city as well as the federal Reaching Home program, which is administered by the city, is just over $600,000. I think the biggest thing is actually seeing beds and units being built and being in a position to be occupied. We do a lot of other programming work in the community to help those that are experiencing homelessness or experiencing trouble with access to housing, but to see new units is really what we need.
YWCA will continue to develop educational and empowering programming for HOPE participants that will prepare them to find higher education options, employment opportunities, housing and childcare providers, and essential services supports. Despite what you're about to see, this is not someone trying to recreate a scene from Mission Impossible. An elderly driver apparently made a wrong turn and headed down the famous Spanish Steps in Rome. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to make it all the way down. He was eventually stopped by security. Police say alcohol was not a factor. Eventually, a crane was brought in to lift the car from the steps. There's no word on whether the driver will be facing any charges, but he might be paying for that crane service. It was locker cleanout day for the Edmonton Oilers, with reporters having one final opportunity to ask players about the season that was and about the future. The big question everyone wants an answer to, though, is what's next for Captain Connor McDavid? The Oilers can sign him to a contract extension on July 1st, and while fans desperately wanted that, what does McDavid want?
If I feel that there's a good window to win here over and over again, then signing is no problem. Yeah, I again, it's only been a couple of days. I'm sure we'll get into it over the course of the next couple of weeks. But again, I'm not in a rush to make any decision, so I don't think that there needs to be any timeline. I know people are going to look at that July 1 day and be looking to see if there's anything done. But for me, I'm just not in a rush that way. So
I'm going to be honest, I haven't really talked to Connor about it yet. There comes a time where we talk about it, but there's nothing that I can tell you right now that you want to hear or you need to hear. That's his situation, and he will do what's best for him and his family. And do I want him here forever? Yes, of course. I think everybody does. So, yeah, there's not much I can give you there.
NHL free agents hit the market on July the 1st. Before we take a break, we want to let you know about a special episode of Leaders on the Frontier that is live now on YouTube. David Leese is joined by intelligence expert Scott McGregor and crisis management expert Lieutenant Colonel David Redman to discuss Israel and Iran at war. Colonel Redman shares that much of anti-Israel sentiment we're seeing here in Canada and in all G7 countries is being funded by China.
But of course, China has been massively active in Canada for the past decade with absolutely no challenge. And we've seen it over and over again. Their influence in our election system, the influence into our industry and our private institutions. China is overtly now challenging all of the institutions of our country, from our courts to our police to each and every one of the elements that we used to take for granted in Canada. I put it to you that China's doing the same thing in all of the G7 countries. And so if we haven't already realized that we're in war, we should wake up, because it's been going on in Canada overtly for 10 years.
To hear more of Israel and Iran at war, just go to Leaders on the Frontier channel on YouTube and hit subscribe. Well, today was a beautiful one out there, but we're about to get drenched. Friday's forecast is looking at 5 to 10 millimeters of rain. I will be right back with the full weather forecast. Welcome back. Well, if you love the sunshine, you can say goodbye to it, at least for a few days. Starting Friday, we can expect 5 to 10 millimeters of rain, and then another 10 to 15 millimeters Friday night. Rain again on a Saturday, and could see some periods of rain also on Sunday. And look at those temperatures too. We're going down from 27 right down to the teens there, right down to a high of only 10 degrees on Sunday. So it's going to feel like a totally different month of June. As we get into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we'll see the sunshine again with the partly cloudy skies. And temperature not rising again until we get into Tuesday. So average high for this time of year, 23 degrees, average low 9. That record high happening on this day back in 1985, it was 32 degrees on that day. And on this day back in 1949, we had the record low, which was only 2 degrees. Sun rose this morning at 5:23 and setting this evening at 9:42 p.m. That means we are going to be having 16 hours, 19 minutes of daylight today. That's a nice long June day. Love it. Okay, so 60% chance of showers expected both Vancouver and Victoria tomorrow. Victoria sitting at 16 for the high, 14 for the high in Vancouver, a little lower than normal. Edmonton and Calgary, 60% chance of showers in both of those cities, as well as a risk of a thunderstorm, and temperatures also only in the teens there. Edmonton sitting at a high of 19 and high of only 16 tomorrow in Calgary. Not so much in the rest of the prairies, though. We're seeing those high 20s there, so 20 in Saskatoon. Both Saskatoon and Regina sitting under a severe thunderstorm watch tonight, but tomorrow increasing clouds. Regina sitting at 25 tomorrow and 28 for the high expected in Winnipeg, and Winnipeg could see some showers. Now, as we look to the central part of the country, Toronto, slight chance of showers, could see a risk of a thunderstorm in the afternoon, high 25 there, 24 for the high in Ottawa with clearing skies, and a chance of showers also expected tomorrow in Montreal with a high of 24 degrees. Looking to Atlantic Canada now, Fredericton seeing quite a bit of rain, going to be expecting 10 to 15 millimeters tomorrow, high 24 there, 23 expected for the high in Halifax. Slight chance of showers. Showers or drizzle expected also in Charlottetown, high 26, and 23 in St. John's. Also expecting some showers or drizzle there as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast. Canada is going ahead with its digital services tax on big tech companies that's set to take effect at the end of the month. The tax will hit companies like Amazon, Google, Meta, Uber, and Airbnb with a 3% levy on revenue from Canadian users.
We've had fairly long, extensive discussions at the last G7 about, the different regime that you find in different parts of the world. That's not unique to Canada, by the way. Just let's put that in context. This is not the big thing. The big thing is all the VAT and other type of taxes you have around the world. And we had a discussion at the G7 about a few weeks ago, and even in Washington last time, to explain to our American colleagues that a lot like the VAT they have in Europe and the GST we have in Canada is neutral, so that it applies to goods, whether there's no distinction in terms of import and export. So we're going to continue to have these discussions and make our case.
Canada had been facing mounting pressure to pause the tax ahead of trade discussions with the U.S. A new report by Royal LePage says more than half of renters in Canada spend over 30% of their net income on rent. Many Canadians are still facing affordability challenges, even as asking rent prices have fallen this year. And because of those challenges, 4 in 10 respondents say they have reduced spending on groceries and food. Meanwhile, 3 in 10 have reduced contributions to savings on retirement. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 53 points to 26,506. The Dow was down 44 points to 42,171. The S&P 500 was down 1 point to 5,980, and the Nasdaq was up 25 points to 19,546. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 30 cents to 75.14 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 8 cents to $4.07 US. Gold was down 25.10 to 33.64.60 US an ounce, and silver was down 22 cents to 36.86 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.79 per bushel, barley is at $6.92, canola is at $16.78, and corn is at $7.67 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was up $1.05 to $224.30. Feeder cattle August contract was up 82 cents to $304.17, and lean hogs was up 52 cents to $112.17. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 73 cents US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Lethbridge Police Service and Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services have recovered the body of a 17-year-old boy from the Oldman River this morning. The unidentified boy was reportedly attempting to swim across the river near the site of the high-level bridge Wednesday night when he went under the water and never resurfaced. Crews searched through the evening and early this morning after suspending the search through the night and eventually found the body near the initial site of the incident. Police send their condolences to the family and friends of the victim. Will the U.S. join forces with Israel against Iran? We will discuss this plus a lot more with our foreign affairs expert and editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari. That's coming up next. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure and send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews. With Israel and Iran poised for an all-out battle, will the United States get involved? That's the question. The world is watching to see what U.S. President Donald Trump will do. Here for commentary is Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk. Lisa, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, Lisa, right now, Israel is vowing vengeance after Iran targeted a hospital with a ballistic missile Thursday. And meanwhile, Iranian state TV is accusing Israel of striking its heavy water reactor prior to the attack. So right now, eyes are on the country's supreme leader. But the Israeli defense minister made a very direct threat against that Iranian leader. What did he say, Lisa?
You know, it's interesting because a lot of people ask, why didn't Israel eliminate the supreme leader, being such a symbolic figure, the guardian of the Islamic Republic, somebody who has for decades terrorized the people of Iran, and just the way he has controlled and has ordered attacks and has ordered proxies to attack and has American blood on his hands and of course has Israeli blood on his hands. Why didn't they just go and eliminate really the head of the snake? And Trump has also come out and said, we know exactly where he is, but we're going to hold off on killing him for now. In the meantime, the hospital attack that you mentioned, there's a lot of misinformation, as usual, on social media today about this. This was a civilian hospital with actual patients. This is not, somewhere where it was, a hidden headquarters or somewhere like we're seeing in Gaza, where they're actually conducting military operations or terrorist operations from a hospital. This is completely a civilian hospital and therefore a war crime. So this did up the ante and really angered Israeli authorities, who are really in the midst of a very pinpointed, targeted campaign in Iran. Look, war is always devastating. There will always be casualties and it's always ugly. But at the same time, we're seeing the way that the Islamic Republic is indiscriminately lobbing tons of missiles into Israel, hoping to have civilian casualties, whereas Israel is pinpointing these attacks on Iranian soil to target military and nuclear sites to really try to prevent civilian casualties as much as possible. But again, war is very ugly, and we're watching this escalate. In the meantime, we're waiting to see if the United States will join in.
Yeah, well, and that's just the question, right? And I think a comment was made that he should not even exist, talking about the Iranian supreme leader, that he should not continue to exist, which I think he's taking as a very direct personal threat. And so Israel and Iran trade missile attacks, as this is happening, the U.S. has called for Iran's unconditional surrender. And in response to Iran's supreme leader, who said, quote, "the battle begins." So what is the likelihood of the U.S. joining Israel's military campaign and targeting Tehran's uranium enrichment plant, Lisa?
Right. So Donald Trump is keeping everyone waiting. He has hinted towards, I may join, I may not join, and we will know in the next 24 to 48 hours. If you ask me, I think it looks like the U.S. will join, and I'll tell you why. This is a very calculated decision that remains. If the United States does join in, they can help the Israelis complete the mission. And the mission is to bring the Islamic Republic to a zero capability with regards to its nuclear program. If we leave any residual, meaning there are 12 sites, the major one being Fordo. Fordo is a very difficult site to target, underground, 13 feet walls. It's not something that Israel can tackle on its own. If the United States joins in and does assist in the mission of destroying this one site, then we will be able to see the zero capability. If we leave residual, then we'll see the Islamic Republic continue on with its weapons procurement. And that's really the bottom line. This is not boots on the ground. This does not mean that we are, being bullied by Israel or its prime minister. This is not anything related to the Bible. This is purely a logistical decision because, and this is the main point that I have been making around the clock, the main point is that the Islamic Republic is a major national security risk for the United States. This is not a charity project. It's not a gift to our ally Israel. Obviously, we would be joining, but they have done most of the heavy lifting. They have done very well. And that is exactly why we're seeing Trump pivot the way that he has. Trump wants to win. Trump wants peace through strength. Trump wants to see XYZ results in this equation. And he sees that the Israelis are very close to accomplishing this zero level capability in terms of their nuclear portfolio. And that is why we're seeing the evolution of the Trump tweets when it comes to dealing with Iran's regime.
Yeah, so it looks like the president has been briefed on both the risks and the benefits of bombing Iran's most, secure nuclear sites. And so his mindset being that disabling it is necessary because of the risk of weapons being produced in such a relatively short time over there. So he obviously sees the necessity, but what could all of this mean, Lisa, for the people of Iran, for the innocent people, and for the world as a whole if Trump helps to bomb these nuclear sites? Where might it go from there?
Right. So look, any diminishing of this murderous regime is a gift to the world. It's a gift to the Iranian people, it's a gift to the region, and a gift to the world at large. They are the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. They support terrorism proxies. They're responsible for October 7th. They're responsible for the protests that we saw on our college campuses. They are embedded in, we have sleeper cells here in the United States. You have them in Canada. They are everywhere. So any diminishing of that threat is really going to help stabilize the entire world, and that is not hyperbole at all. Going back to the Iranian people, who are our #1 ally in really defeating this regime, is the Iranian people. Now, the United States and Israel, for that matter, have kept regime change and bringing them down to a zero level in terms of their nuclear program very separate. They do want to see regime change, if it should happen very naturally, organically in the hands of the Iranian people. Should Israel and the United States in conjunction be able to destabilize and really weaken the regime to a point where the people can then come out onto the streets and do exactly what they have done in the past, but this time with that international support. And of course, with the regime being diminished in the way that it has been. So yes, they're in the middle of a war. We have not seen them come out in a significant way. We have seen here and there protests, and we have seen celebrations of this diminishment. Again, they're not actually celebrating war, but they are celebrating the deaths of those who have killed their children and have caused so much bloodshed and have really made their lives miserable and have taken away their freedoms for decades. So there is a very complex feeling in Iran across the board. Majority of 85 million people very disenchanted with the regime. So they're watching very carefully, but it is complex as there's war on their soil, and that's never ever an easy thing.
No, it isn't. You just really have to feel for those innocent Iranian people, many of them just trying to go about their daily lives. And, we not that long ago, you and I spoke about the truckers over there, the truck drivers striking with the hope of sort of collapsing the regime, because the regime is so dependent on the truckers. And it just seems like so many of these, I guess, movements fizzle out, don't they?
Right, they do, because they don't have that next level support that they need to take it and create a momentum out of it. We have seen so many protests over the years, and the most outstanding ones being the Green Revolution of 2009, which started out as a protest over a fraudulent election. It turned into wanting regime change and saying the whole system is fraudulent. And then the Women Life Freedom protest that we saw just a couple of years ago, which was over the death of a 22-year-old who wore her hijab improperly and then was beaten to death for it. So a lot of young people came out onto the streets. A lot of women in Iran and around the world cutting their hair in solidarity came out onto the streets. Really a lot of momentum we saw. But those, again, as you said, and it's a very important point to make, is that those movements, as brave as the Iranian people were, many people handcuffed, many people killed because of those protests, but they never made it to the next level because they lacked that support to continue on. And then the crackdowns were so brutal that they ended up making people go back home and regret coming out when they made examples out of people that were killed and hanged and executed and raped and maimed and blinded because of the regime's policies. So it's such a complex story to tell. And as all, as history does tell us, every one of these revolutions that are significant and meaningful for the people, there's a price to pay, and it's very unfortunate, very unfortunate. But we do hope that the Iranian people's pain and suffering, and even at this moment, does bring them to better days ahead.
Oh, yes, here's hoping, exactly. Back on U.S. soil, The View, if you're familiar with the show The View, most of us are. So The View's Whoopi Goldberg facing criticism now after she compared life for Black people living in America to life in Iran. And I don't know if any of our viewers watched The View, but Lisa, what was the context of what Whoopi said here?
Horrific. They were talking about just the lack of rights in Iran and how difficult it is living in Iran. And Whoopi Goldberg said, well, it's not any worse than the United States. And she really went on to say, for Black people, it's XYZ, and it's not, and really a couple of the panelists were just taken aback and said, you cannot, as flawed as the United States may be, you cannot compare in 2025 the United States and the Islamic Republic. And she kept pushing back on that. I actually was quoted in a Fox News piece about this. I actually was interviewed to be on The View, and thank God that didn't work out, because I really would lose years off of my life with these kinds of conversations.
Oh my gosh, I would love to see you on that show, Lisa.
Oh my goodness. But if I had heard this kind of comment come out of Whoopi's mouth, I mean, the level of ignorance, the fact that she, as a woman of color, having this platform, having the freedom to sit there, the way that she's dressed, showing her hair, communicating freely, anything she wants, any criticism of her own government and her own country, this would never fly in the Islamic Republic, first of all. Second of all, wow, she owes an apology to all the Iranian people, the minorities, the gays, the Christians, the singers and the dancers and the journalists who have been imprisoned and killed, and really all because they live in a country that has not allowed them any of the freedoms that she enjoys. So really tone deaf, and I'm glad that there has been a tremendous amount of pushback on her ignorance, because I mean,
even her co-panelist, Alyssa, right? She was really pushing back on that as well. And I mean, I love Whoopi as an actress, as a star, but she wouldn't be in the position she's in today if she had lived in Iran. She wouldn't be.
Had she lived anywhere?
Had she lived anywhere, yeah, it's
anywhere else. And it's tremendous that she does not show that gratitude for the country that gave her all those things. And again, as flawed, and I'm not saying, the United States is perfect. You never say Canada is perfect. We always talk very openly about where we live and how we can do better as a society, as a government, as a people. But to make that false, just comparison, it really does diminish the people who truly do need our help, who need us to be their voices. It sounds horribly, horribly out of touch. She sounds spoiled and really ungrateful for everything that she has.
Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk, thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate having you on.
Thank you for having me, Jeanette.
Well, I think we all want to live life as healthily as we possibly can, and increasingly people seem to be looking to natural health solutions. So today's guest has some different approaches to achieving health. Joining me today is Dr. Krista Coombs. She is a licensed doctor of acupuncture with education as a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine and a certified functional medicine practitioner and owner of AcuPlus Wellness Clinic here in Lethbridge. Here she is. Good to have you with us, Dr. Coombs.
Wow, I'm excited.
That's quite a bit of education and background that you have there.
Yes, it took a while, and I've been in practice for 24 years so far and counting.
Yeah.
So I've been in the business for a long, long time.
Amazing. Okay, so first off, maybe can you tell us a bit about your clinic? What kinds of services do you offer, and what kinds of health issues do you typically help with?
Yeah, so it's morphed over time as my own health has morphed, and I have I still do an active amount of acupuncture therapy for patients. But I have integrated for the last 11 years functional medicine with the Chinese medicine, which is just phenomenal. And that was sparked by going through my own autoimmune illness catastrophe in perimenopause. So now I've become, I would say, an expert in helping women in particular learn to manage autoimmune diseases in peri and postmenopause.
Wow, no, incredible. So functional medicine is maybe a term that some viewers may be unfamiliar with. Can you maybe explain what functional medicine is?
It was coined by Dr. Jeffrey Bland back in the late 80s, so it's fairly young. And what it is, it's using Western peer-reviewed studied research as it's applied to some degree in Western medicine, but holistically. So we're looking at the body as a whole entity rather than so mechanistically, like it's a liver issue, it's a heart issue, it's a brain issue. It's a whole person issue. So I like to say it's basically a holistic Western medical approach, but it's very integrative. So it's taking that holistic mindset of the ancient medicines like Chinese medicine, which I'm well versed in, or Ayurvedic medicine, which is also pretty amazing. And it's a kind of putting them together. It's exceptional. It's the foundational
like East
piece.
Meets West almost, right?
Well, and goes deeper even than that. Like I think it's more, we have a lot of fancy testing that we can do in functional medicine. It's very cool. For a geek like me, that is really fun. But in most cases, we don't need to do all that fancy testing. You can tell a lot by symptoms, by context, and then it's lifestyle, some medication, some supplementation.
For sure. Well, we'll get into all of that. So first of all, how would you go about trying to find the root cause of a patient's condition?
Yeah, so root cause is sort of a misdirection maybe.
Okay.
So when you're dealing with complex beings like us, you can never have just one root cause. There's a lifetime of damage over time, impacts of mental stress, traumas, infections, vaccinations, and so on that can contribute to the decline of organ systems. And then they all relate to each other, and then there's genetics. So when you're looking at root causes, you're saying, what are the things that maybe tripped us up when we were a little younger or recently even? And are they manageable, or do we have to just accept that they existed and we're mopping up the mess and trying to regain some function? So I don't usually use root cause anymore, although that is a real tenet of functional medicine, because we have root causes, and then some can be managed and some can't.
So what kind of testing would take place then with this?
So my favorite stuff is just looking at some really good blood work. So if we do comprehensive blood work, like you're not just going to scratch the surface. I mean, we can do a lot of really great stuff with subsidized blood work. So if you know what you're looking for and you're looking for patterns and how the organ systems are working together, it's so fun to look at somebody's blood work. It's good that I love it so much. But
you're the right person for the job.
Oh, for sure. It's a joy. And then that usually gives us a great snapshot in time of what somebody's going through. You pair that with all the symptoms. It's you can really start there. If you don't get enough momentum though with that level of complexity, then you can look at hormones in urine, in saliva. You can do blood testing for immune markers that are exceptional, that go way beyond what we see in regular blood work. We can do comprehensive stool tests and look for microbes and viruses and fungi and different enzymes. And it's truly amazing, but you don't always have to spend money and go that deep.
So maybe, Krista, can you share some of the treatments that might be involved with this? Like, are we talking supplements, or is it more like diet, exercise, holistic
so
stuff?
Lifestyle is definitely the number one. Like if you are what you eat, absorb, and then eliminate. So if that's not functioning very efficiently, and it gets worse as we age, so it's not as efficient, we try to really nail that down. If you can do that work and you're willing to do that work, I call it healing by design. So we set up a strategy to do that. You can't out-supplement a shitty lifestyle, so you want to make sure that you're not just relying on a pill for every ill, even in green medicine like this, right? So I like to marry some medications if people are on them or have to be on them or we're weaning them off with really high quality, low non-medicinal ingredient type supplements that are really strategic in their use, but definite, or even herbs. I mean, herbs are more like medicine, like food anyways. But dialing in that lifestyle piece, movement, sleep and rest, your mindset piece about why you want to be well. and eating is really, hydration is really important.
Yeah. I understand you do a fair bit of work with women going through menopause. So what are some of the best treatments for that? I know it's very conventional to do the hormone therapy. Is that controversial? Are there risks involved? You hear about risks, but then other people say the risks are very minimal. So what are you thinking?
So I would say that it's actually not very conventional anymore to do hormone replacement therapy, but it needs to be. It needs to be. Because of a big study that was done in 2002, it was actually done for 4 years, it just got blown out of proportion. It wasn't interpreted correctly. It was, the hormones that we can use today are more like ours. Well, they are like ours. They're bioidentical. So you don't necessarily have to use the artificially made ones, although they are still in practice, like birth control and progestins. But I think that is a really solid use of medicine. And it'd be like saying a woman has lost her thyroid function and we're giving her thyroid medications. It's not a problem. It's not really a big issue. It's the same thing. We're supplementing some low dose hormones for women in perimenopause, kind of especially near the tail end, especially if they're having a lot of issues. Can really soften the experience, because those hormones, testosterone, progesterone, estrogens, there's different forms of those. They are on nearly every cell. You have receptors for them on nearly every cell in the body, including the immune system, not just reproduction. The brain gets involved, the liver gets involved, the gallbladder gets involved, the gut gets involved. I mean, it's everywhere, kidneys, everything. So if we can supplement some, I'm a big proponent of that. However, you can use less, or they are metabolized more efficiently and effectively with less side effects if you dial in the lifestyle piece.
Okay,
so
interesting.
That's where I think we're missing out in Western medical circles. If they're not getting enough education in this. And a lot of them aren't, because they're not reading the new research and really digging into it, because it's not required training. So people come to people like me who I read all the papers. I have a biology degree too, so science was my thing. And I'm trying to dig into that, and I'm a big fan, but you got to do the lifestyle piece.
That's
Again, it's not a pill for every ill.
You're the second person that I've interviewed that has talked about that study, and how was it blown out of proportion? There was a cancer risk back is what they were looking at, and I think that study was done even in the 90s.
Well, the Women's Health Initiative that's the study. It was a random, an RCT, random controlled study, trial, and they had thousands and thousands and thousands of women, but they had a huge age difference in these women. So you're comparing women who are early into postmenopause, so early 50s, to people in their 60s and 70s. If they hadn't been on hormone replacement for decades, they're already having a huge decline because of the loss of those hormones. So comparing, there's not apples to oranges, it's basically apples to oranges, right? We're not the same. So what they were doing is they were particularly looking at hormone replacement, and again, not using a bioidentical progesterone, they were using a progestin with some mare's urine, which is a combination of estrogens. It's like 10 forms of estrogen, some of which we don't even make. And so but it still was very effective. And they were looking at the effects of that on heart disease in particular, and I think there was a few things, but they noticed across the board, breast cancer, and they noticed across the board that the older people who hadn't been on any HRT tended to have a not even a statistically significant increase in breast cancer risk and heart disease. Heart disease is the #1 killer of women in postmenopause. Number one, not breast cancer, it's heart disease. Incredible. Then it's like lung cancer. And then it's breast cancer. And then you've got all kinds of osteoporotic changes to the bone and hip fractures. And, I think it's like 50% of them die within the first year from complications. HRT can help prevent a lot of that if you start it earlier, if you're a good candidate for it.
That's what I've heard. So you're basically saying that you were taking women who had been in postmenopause for decades, suddenly giving it to them, and then it's how their body reacted to it. That makes sense. That's very interesting.
And so when it was really dug into, and even some people who had done were part of that study, some of the researchers, have since, in the decades since, have talked openly about, we didn't really think that through, and we should have maybe analyzed the data differently, because it sent shockwaves of fear across the planet. And I don't think people have recovered from that, because I have patients who are older than me in their 60s and 70s who are terrified to even consider it. I have people in the 50s who are terrified to consider it because of this outdated knowledge, but they're not doing the homework. When you take that study and you start looking at it in terms of age groups, like the first 10 years versus after, when you start this HRT, and whether you start estrogen alone or estrogen with a progesterone, it's a totally different outcome for risk. In fact, most things you get a significant, so a statistically significant benefit for bone health, brain health, heart health, mood, kidneys, everything, right? It's across the board. So I mean, if you're a good candidate, it's actually a really smart move.
Yeah.
And
Lots of
menopause
positives there.
Totally. Menopause is genius. It allows women to, I think it is. I think that, very few animals go through menopause in nature. There's only a handful.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's some like whales and elephants and us,
Okay.
and a lot of primates. But I think it's smart because if you think about what women are doing for most of their lives, whether they have children or not, they are definitely caregivers.
Yeah.
We are always out serving oriented. And the opposite gender generally isn't quite so much like that.
Oh, we're going to get hate mail now for sure.
I know that they can be, but historically, it's sort of, our roles haven't been like that worldwide. And we tend to over-deliver, over-serve, give. If we didn't stop some point, we'd die young anyways. So I think turning that off allows for a different sense of self and exploration. But I just think that low-dose hormone replacement therapy in early 50s or even late 40s, or if you had a hysterectomy even earlier, can give you that opportunity to really delve deep into who you really want to be now. And you get, it's just so powerful. So I think that's the genius of menopause.
That's like the most positive explanation of menopause I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, I can go deeper, but that's kind of something I'm exploring, and I love that mindset piece.
Yeah. So you were saying, HRT, as long as there's a lifestyle component there. So we're talking exercise, foods, right? Diet.
Definitely. And that's a personalized medicine. That's what functional medicine ultimately is personalized medicine.
What types of foods should be avoided?
Yeah.
Like the typical?
So as we're getting older, the body, when the hormones start to plummet, even if you're on even low dose hormone therapy, there is a change in how your body handles certain macros. So sugar, proteins, carbs, right? Other carbs and fats. Yeah. So because our cells are no longer getting that same kind of impact from those sex hormones, there's changes. And so if you're not going to become as efficient at handling sugars, for example, well, it's going to get stored.
HRT can't help with that?
I mean, you're never going to be taking enough, I think, to be menstruating again, right? So no.
Okay.
I think it helps quite a bit, but it's not going to make you like you were 30 again, where you can go to the gym a couple times a week, do some cardio and you're fine. I think that the big thing that's changing with the research right now, and we're getting more and more research for women because we didn't have much. It was mostly all about men and muscle building and stuff. So now we're getting some for women, and we're seeing that even though we're not as efficient at breaking down proteins in our food and actually making proteins like muscle, when you do certain kinds of exercise differently now in this stage of life, you can build more muscle even, and then that revs up your metabolism and can keep things going. Now the problem is, there's multiple. If you have any kind of autoimmunity against the thyroid, there's already an impact on your potential for weight loss, and you have to work a little bit harder. You have to work differently. And so that's why I say personalized medicine is so important. And same with the food piece, in terms of sensitivities, things that you have an immune sensitivity to. If you have an autoimmune condition, there's great research. This is my wheelhouse for sure. Great research to suggest, giving up gluten religiously, and just it's a non-negotiable. Sometimes it's dairy proteins and other things. And so not everybody has to do that, but we're looking at definitely sugar metabolism, protein metabolism, fat metabolism is different, and we store it in different places. It starts to go around the middle.
Oh yeah.
And that is a common theme. We go from being a pear to an apple, that's like, I'd rather be a pear. But it's that working to go, wow, accepting that the body has changed. And then instead of being angry about it, which we all go through, there's a whole mourning period.
Oh yeah.
There is, and then we say, well, what can I do? And that's where people like me can be really influential, because you have to do things differently to get new results. It's like, I don't know, it's like you become a whole new woman and then you get to craft it, which I love.
Yeah, okay. We're out of time here, but like we could go on and on about hot flashes and everything else, right?
There's over 100 symptoms,
we'll
so
have to have you back. But Dr. Krista Coombs is a certified functional medicine practitioner with AcuPlus Wellness Clinic here in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.